Yes. So I guess it has started recording. Let's just double check. Yes. So last time I think I forgot. Most likely I forgot, but somehow the recording did not work for the second part. So this time I have started. So it should work. Okay. So let's, as usual, start by recalling what we did last time. Uh, so today is lecture 6. So lecture 5, we did a number of theorems, right? We proved a number of theorems. What were the names? We proved Liouville's theorem. Then we proved maximum modulus and minimum modulus, MMT, maximum modulus theorem, and as a corollary, the minimum modulus theorem. Then I guess we proved fundamental theorem of algebra, and then we took a break, and after the break we did Cauchy's estimates, and making use of Cauchy's estimates in a crucial way, we of course discussed the compact convergence, also known as uniform convergence on compact sets. We discussed that this is the natural notion of convergence that comes up in complex analysis, one variable complex analysis. So we defined it. You would have seen it anyway, but we also defined it. And we proved a very beautiful, appealing result, which is that if you have holomorphic functions and if they converge pointwise to a function, then it turns out that that function is also holomorphic. And not only that, we proved that the derivatives of this sequence of functions, fn prime, they converge uniformly on compact subsets to the correct derivatives of the limit function. Fn prime converges to f prime, fn double prime converges to f double prime, etc. And this convergence is also good enough, good in the sense uniform on compact subsets, uniform convergence on compact subsets. So I guess this is what we have done last time. Maybe it's good to quickly recall. I'm coming to the slides, but let's quickly also recall the proofs. So I guess all these, the way Rudin did it, and we followed that approach, the main point was a certain identity. Once on a disk, if you have a power series representation for f, suppose you write f as f of z equal to summation cn z minus a power n on some disk DAR, then we proved a particular, let's say, a trigonometric kind of identity, right? There's a sum involving the coefficients of the power series, and we wrote that precisely summation mod cn square r power 2n, where r is the radius of the disk. Then this was equal to a certain integral. Integral from minus pi to pi, normalized by dividing by 2 pi. Integral from minus pi to pi, modulus of f of a plus r e power I theta whole square, mod square d theta. And all these results came as a consequence. So this was a crucial identity that we used in proving all these things. For example, maybe we should go to the slide so that I can project that identity, and let's one line very quickly recall how the proofs went. So let me start sharing the slides so that that identity is visible to all of you. So let's start sharing. It's visible, the slides?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, you can see the slides, and so let's go to the slides. Yeah. So today we will do two results. IFT is inverse function theorem. So you would have done a very general inverse function theorem in multivariable calculus over Rn. We will do R2 in the complex case, a bit simpler than that, and we will prove it. And this is with the aim of proving OMT. What is OMT? Open mapping theorem. What is an open map? A map which takes open sets to open sets. And open mapping theorem, the content is that a holomorphic function on a region is an open map. It takes an open set to an open set. So this is what we will do, and then we will discuss other aspects of the course. Whatever you need to tell me, you should tell me today. Okay. Later, please don't send individual messages. Let's discuss everything. Everything will be done together, and let's discuss everything and stick to it. Okay. So yeah. So we were recalling. We did all these theorems, and I already said that this was the main identity. And let's just quickly recall what was the proof of Liouville once you have this. So Liouville says that bounded entire is constant. So if you have an entire function, you have your power series with radius of convergence infinity. So you have Cn z power n, which is valid throughout the complex plane. And you assume it is bounded. Mod fz is strictly less than m for some capital M. And plug in here. So this is less than m square comes out and the rest is 1. So you are getting this is less than or equal to m square, and this is true for all r. All r. So when r goes to, if r is non-zero, then I mean, if the coefficients are non-zero, for large r you will get a contradiction. Therefore, all the coefficients where r is coming, those coefficients have to be 0. So only C0 remains. So f is a constant. So that was proof of Liouville. What was the proof of MMT? MMT, you wanted to basically say that there's no local maximum. So if you have a disk, if you take a closed disk around a point, the maxima can come only at the boundary. In other words, you are saying that if you take any disk at the center, so if you take a disk DAR, closed disk, then at the center, the value mod FA, it has to be less than or equal to maximum over theta of mod f of a plus r e power I theta. This is what you had to show. And suppose not, then you will get that this is less than or equal to mod FA. So mod FA square will come out from this identity. And once again, if coefficients are non-zero, you will get a contradiction because C0 itself is FA. So mod C0 square plus something is less than mod C0 square is a contradiction. Therefore, plus something part is 0. Therefore, only C0 will remain, and therefore the function f of z equal to f of a throughout that disk, and therefore throughout your omega because of identity theorem. Because on a disk has a limit point, and on a set with a limit point, two things agree, so they agree very good. That was the proof of MMT. And what was minimum modulus theorem? You apply maximum modulus theorem to 1 by f. So 1 by f should make sense. So you should put this condition that f has no zeros. Only then you can state the minimum modulus theorem. So if f has no zeros, then the minimum modulus will attain only on the boundary. Fundamental theorem of algebra. If you have a polynomial and assume it has no zero, then you will argue with 1 by p. And our proof was using maximum modulus theorem. So I think what you did is this was the first assignment question. The point is you choose r big enough, and I asked you to give a precise r bigger than which will do the job. But anyway, choose r big enough, and you can choose r big enough so that if p is your polynomial, p of r e power I theta, its modulus is strictly bigger than p of 0. And then if you take f to be 1 by p, you're getting mod of f0 is less than f of r e power I theta modulus for all theta, and that contradicts maximum modulus theorem. So that shows it should have at least. So what is the contradiction? Because you assume that p has no root. That's why you took 1 by p and argued with 1 by p. So that's wrong. So p should have at least one root, and that proves fundamental theorem of algebra. Coming to Cauchy's estimates, what do you need to show? You need to show that nth derivative at a point modulus is less than or equal to n factorial m by r power n, where r is the radius of the disk on which we are considering this question. So what was the proof? Again, it's the same identity. See, all the proofs, it's just this identity. So what would be the proof here? So you have a disk of radius some r, and you take any number smaller than that r and argue for all those r's uniformly. I mean, all those r's you argue. and you have got this thing, and if mod fz is less than m on the disk, then m square comes out. So you are getting this is less than or equal to m square. So each of this term is less than or equal to m square, and therefore you get mod Cn is less than or equal to m by r power n, and Cn is nothing but nth derivative by n factorial at the center A. So that proves Cauchy's estimates, and you can take the small r, go into capital R. In the limit, you get the result for capital R. That was Cauchy's estimates. And compact convergence, what do you have to show? If Fn converges to F and Fn's are holomorphic, show that F is holomorphic, first of all. What was the idea? You have uniform convergence. If you take a triangle, right? Cauchy's theorem for triangle, boundary of triangle is compact. So you have you can and you are assuming uniform convergence on compact set. So boundary of triangle is compact. So if you take integral of f along the boundary of a triangle, f is limit of fn, you can interchange limit and integral because of uniform convergence. And each of the inside integral is 0 because of Cauchy's theorem for a triangle. Therefore, integral of f along any boundary of any triangle is 0 by Morera, and f is continuous, of course, because it's a uniform limit. And all these integrals are 0. Therefore, by Morera's theorem, f is holomorphic. And then I gave you this assignment 2 to show that a certain set is compact, which was a set containing your compact set. So you want to show that fn prime converges to f prime uniformly. So take a compact set K and choose this E, which is compact containing K, and apply Cauchy's estimate, and you will get mod fn prime minus f prime is less than or equal to norm of fn prime minus f prime on this bigger compact set E divided by the radius of this circle that we are choosing. And so on the right side can be made arbitrarily small because fn converges to f uniformly on compact sets, and therefore the left hand side is made arbitrarily small on any k that you started with, which shows so it's Cauchy's estimate. You have chosen in E such that all this dzr is contained in E. And in this assignment, Aryaman gave a slightly simpler argument. So in the assignment, I showed you that I asked you to show that this E that we define, which is union of d bar zr as z varies in k, that is compact. And Aryaman, of course, proved that, and also gave this other argument that you don't need to argue that this set is compact. You can instead construct a set which is obviously compact and argue with that. So that's also correct. So maybe I'll request Aryaman to give this argument on WhatsApp so that others can also see. And this E itself is compact, which was the assignment question. Only 2 students have done it absolutely correctly, Aryaman and Omkar. And fortunately, in the sense, I'm always happy to see different proofs. And these 2 proofs are, the packaging is very different, of course. Finally, the basic idea may be same, but the way you present it is very different. So maybe I'll request both of you, Aryaman and Omkar, to share the proofs on WhatsApp in our group so that others can also see the proof. Yeah. Okay, so this was recalling whatever we have done. And what was the main idea behind this proof? This was Parseval's identity. And in this particular case, we were taking the Hilbert space L2 on minus pi to pi. And we know that e power I n theta form an orthonormal basis. And then you have this identity summation norm x square is in a, norm x square for a vector x is summation of inner product of x comma v modulus square as v varies over an orthonormal basis, and we argued with e power I n theta. So everything was, if you are in hindsight having done it, I mean, since Rudin does it, we are looking at Rudin. Once you see the proof, everything looks very natural and simple enough, and everything. This was a crucial identity, and everything followed. So this was nice. Okay, so let's come to today's thing. Today we will do the inverse function theorem and the open mapping theorem. So what is inverse function theorem? You want to say that if there is a point, so you have a holomorphic function, and if there is a point where the derivative is non-zero, you want to say that your function can be inverted. Not throughout, but given a point where the derivative is non-zero, it's a local theorem. It's not a global theorem, it's a local theorem. So if at a point derivative is non-zero, you can find a small neighborhood of that point on which the function is 1, 1. And so if you take the range, it's onto the range, so it is 1, 1 and onto. Therefore, it's invertible, and the pointers, the inverse is also holomorphic. So if you have a function which is holomorphic and at a point the derivative is non-zero, then you can find a small neighborhood around that point where the function is injective 1, 1 onto its range anyway, and therefore on the range it's invertible and the inverse is holomorphic. So we will prove that first, and then we will prove the open mapping theorem, which says that holomorphic functions are automatically open. So you know that the functions are continuous. Inverse image of open is open, but image of open is also open. So this is what we will show today, and then we will move to G Suite. We will test G Suite. Since you know how to log into MS Teams, you should know how to log into G Suite. We will see. And we will also discuss about future quizzes. And as I said, we will have continuous assessment. I might interview you on some of these breaks. We will also have quizzes exactly as we conducted last time over Google Forms. And it's important that you log into G Suite using your LDAP IIT ID. Otherwise, it will not be accessible. And I don't want to allow access from private mails. It has to be an IIT thing. And yeah, somebody want to say something?
So this is Chirag, sir. Sir, sir, yeah, like, can it be possible to make make us upload a PDF or a photo of our proof? Like, it's better than Google Forms, and we can explain it better. We can explain things better.
No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So we will discuss. We will discuss because I mean, if we are having too many quizzes, the point is I also want to test how you can summarize your point very well. So I'm not interested in I mean full essays. I'm interested in getting to the point. I mean, how do you summarize? That's what we are testing in these exams. We will also have other kinds of exams where what you said we will do, but not for these frequent quizzes. This is just to make sure that you are following then and there. And I'm not really looking for a complete answer in these quizzes. This is just to make sure that you are focusing on the class and you are trying to answer what I'm really testing out. And all the details are not important. And Google Forms or Moodle is another possibility, but I prefer Google Forms if we can just do it over. Let's see. First time always you will find some difficulty, but we will iron it out today in the break when we actually test it out on G Suite. Whatever opinions you have, you do say. Okay, we will come to a uniform decision. But let's discuss after the lecture. Yeah. Was this Chirag? I mean, I can't see on the screen the name.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. That was my guess. Okay. So. But take this point again, and I have some more things to say about that point that you made, so we can discuss it at that time. Is that okay, Chirag?
Okay, that's sure.
Yeah, so let's discuss it. So take up this point once again, and let's see what others have to say about this point also. So I will also, say what my expectations are. So let me say it at that time. I wasn't very happy with the way the first quiz went, but let's not say that right now. Okay, when we move over to G Suite. Okay, over G Suite. So let's come to today's class. So holomorphic functions are open, takes open sets to open sets. This was very different from real analysis, not just differentiable functions, even the best functions, polynomials, they are not open. You can think of an example very quickly, even in one variable real numbers, even polynomials are not open maps. Okay, as a preparation to proving open mapping theorem, we first prove what is called inverse function theorem, which I already stated. So if f is holomorphic, and if it has a non-vanishing derivative at a point, then there exists a neighborhood of that point, some small neighborhood, where, say V, where on which f is first of all injective, and therefore injective, and then it's an open map. And yeah, so open I did not say last time when I was recalling IFT, but it's also open and it's invertible on the range, and F inverse also turns out to be holomorphic on FV. This is what we have to do first. Okay, so this is IFT. IFT may not have this openness, but that's also part of. So let me call this theorem towards OMT. So it is IFT plus the assertion of openness. Okay, and our starting point is a particular function being continuous. So recall, this kind of a function we have used while proving Cauchy integral formula, but that was a one variable function. If W is a constant, or in this case, if Z is a constant, if you define GZW like this, then we showed that this is, I mean, it's obvious that then it's continuous. And then this we used in the proof of Cauchy integral formula. But now I'm taking it as a function of two variables. So G of Z comma W, the same definition, but both are variables. Okay, so it is this if W not equal to Z and F prime Z if W equal to Z. And I want to assert that this function is continuous. Where on omega cross omega as a function of two variables, this is continuous. So this is a very beautiful argument that you can give. I would request you to try this out yourself, otherwise refer to the text. Let's not get into that now because I want to finish the other parts today. So the point is this function is continuous on omega cross omega. So either you try yourself or check Rodin. Rodin has a very nice proof of this. Yeah, very easily and nicely explained also, so you can look at it. So the point is, this is what we are going to use. This function as a function of two variables is continuous throughout omega cross omega. Okay. Now let's start. So what is given to you? There is a point where the function, the derivative is non-zero. So suppose Z0 is such a point. Okay. So if f prime Z0 is non-zero, consider the point Z0 comma Z0 in omega cross omega. And you know that this function g is continuous, so apply the continuity of g at that point Z0 comma Z0. So what will happen? Very near to Z0 comma Z0, g of Z comma W will be near to g of Z0 comma Z0, right? That's continuity. In a neighborhood of Z0 comma Z0, you can choose neighborhood of Z0 comma Z0 so that the function value can be very near to g of Z0 comma Z0. So you will get a neighborhood, V such that g of Z1 comma Z2 is in particular, so it is very near to g of Z0 comma Z0. So you choose V such that it is bigger than, for example, half of modulus g of Z0 comma Z0. It is very near to g of Z0 comma Z0. So modulus of g is very near to modulus of g Z0 comma Z0. In particular, you can choose a V such that it is bigger than or equal to half this number. And what is g of Z0 comma Z0? Our definition was if W not equal to Z, certain quotient, and W equal to Z, it was just F prime at that point. So this is F prime at Z0. So half modulus F prime at Z0. So you have got a neighborhood V, and we are going to show that this neighborhood V will do the job. We wanted to show that there is a neighborhood on which F is invertible and F of V is open and F inverse is holomorphic. So we are going to argue that this V, using the continuity of G, we have chosen a V and this V will do the job. That's the argument. So let's argue this V will do the job. So this is true whenever Z1 and Z2 are from V. So therefore, for Z1 and Z2 in V, notice that modulus of f of Z2 minus f of Z1, right? What is G of Z1 comma Z2? It is modulus of f of Z2 minus f of Z1 by modulus of Z2 minus Z1. So by taking this side, this inequality is just this inequality. Okay, so keep in mind this inequality. What do you have to show? You have to show that on V f is 1, 1, but that's obvious from this inequality, right? If Z1 and Z2 belong to V, you have this inequality, and you want to show that f is 1, 1 on V. So suppose f of Z2 equal to f of Z1. Then this is 0, and therefore this is 0. And f prime Z0 is not 0, that is given to you. F prime Z0 is not 0, therefore Z2 equal to Z1. So 1, 1ness is obvious. I'm going to make one more assertion, which is that f prime is non-vanishing throughout this V. Again from this inequality. 1, 1ness is already done, and f prime is non-vanishing throughout this V. F prime is given to be non-vanishing at the point Z0. Now you have a neighborhood of Z0, and throughout this neighborhood f prime is non-vanishing. Why is that? Because f prime is limit of a quotient like this. F prime at Z2 will be limit of fz2 minus fz1 by z2 minus z1 as z2 goes to z1. But if Z2 and Z1 are in V, then that quotient is bigger than or equal to a positive number. This is a positive number. It's non-zero. Non-zero positive number. So the quotient is bigger than or equal to a positive number. Therefore, the limit is positive number. Therefore, the derivative is positive throughout V. So in particular, f prime is non-vanishing throughout V. So injectivity follows. Also, f prime is never vanishing on V, since all the quotients that you have to take in order to find the derivative, all those have absolute value bigger than a positive number. So you have also shown that f prime is non-vanishing throughout. Now come to the second point. You want to show that f of V is open. Okay, so you want to show that f of V is open. In particular, any open subset of V, if you take, there also the image is open, because the argument goes through for any subset of V also, because f prime is non-vanishing throughout V. So if you take a open subset of V also, it goes. So f is an open map on V is what we are claiming. In particular, we will show that f of V is open. That's enough. The proof is the same. So what do we have to show? You have to take a point in f of V and then show that that point is an interior point of f of V. So if you choose a point in f of V, you have to get a small neighborhood of that point completely contained in f of V. And very beautiful proof, we are going to use minimum modulus theorem in order to show this openness. Okay. So maybe the end of this slide or the end of next slide, it's a beautiful application of minimum modulus theorem. So let's see. Yeah. From my balcony, there's this tree which you can see on the reflection here. It's so many monkeys. Of course, I mean, you were in IIT and you would have seen, there are two types of monkeys everywhere. The common monkeys, the macaque, and also this langoose, no? All of you have seen a lot of langoose, no, on IIT campus? You know langur, right? This one with these monkeys with, the black langoose, the black face and a very long tail. Can one or two of you quickly tell me how many of you have seen langoose in IIT campus? Very fast. Since I asked, I'll wait for one or two answers. Nobody has seen? Chirag, you must have seen.
Yes, sir.
I don't remember.
Hmm?
I don't remember like properly.
No? Okay, can you hear the sound?
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember.
No, but now in the background, can you when I don't talk, can you hear the sound of monkeys?
Yeah, I guess so a little.
Yeah, so many. I hope they don't come here. So okay. So yeah. Anyway, we don't have so much time. Thanks. So let's go back to the slides. Yeah. So we have to show that f of v is open. Yeah, I'm getting distracted. So f of v is open. So take a point and we have to show that it's an interior point, right? We have to show that it's an interior point. So we need to show that any W1 in f of v is an interior point. Pay attention, beautiful application of minimum modulus theorem. So take a W1 and W1 is in f of v. So it is f of Z1 for some Z1. And it is unique because of injectivity, but it doesn't matter to me. So it is f of Z1 for some Z1. And we have to show that there is some R1 such that a disk of radius, open disk of radius R1 around W1, dW1 R1 is contained in f of v, right? This is what we have to show in order to show W1 was arbitrary, so this shows that all points are interior points, establishing that f of v is open. So this is what we have to show. So given W1, I have to show that there is an R1. So the point is to choose an R1 so that this disk around W1 with radius R1 is contained in f of v. That will finish the proof. So what we are going to do is you take a number from this disk, right? You have to take a lambda from dW1R1 and then you have to show that lambda belongs to f of v. That's what you have to show, right? Take a lambda from this and show that that lambda is here, showing this containment. So if you take a lambda from here, what does that mean? That means lambda minus W1 modulus is less than R1 and W1 is f of Z1. So lambda minus f of Z1 modulus is less than R1. So you have to choose an R1 such that if lambda minus f of Z1 modulus is less than R1, then lambda belongs to f of v. But what is the meaning of lambda belongs to f of v? Lambda equal to f of z for some z in v. So that means lambda minus f of z equal to 0. That means lambda minus f has a 0 on v. Okay, so this is what I have written in the slides. So we need an R1 such that if lambda minus f of z1 modulus is less than R1, we have to choose an R1 such that with this property. If lambda minus f of z1 is less than R1, then lambda minus f, the holomorphic function lambda minus f, lambda is a constant. Lambda minus f has a 0 in v. If lambda minus f has a 0 in v, then lambda equal to f of z for some z in v, showing that this inclusion is correct. And this is where MMT is going to play a role, because recall MMT will say that if your holomorphic function has no 0, then there's a certain inequality, minimum cannot be attained inside. So we are going to show that for the function lambda minus f, we are going to choose R1 so that lambda minus f attains a minimum inside a disk. We are going to choose R1 so that lambda minus f attains a minimum inside a certain disk. So that will show that lambda minus f inside a certain disk inside V. And that will show that lambda minus f has to have a 0. Because otherwise, MMT is contradicted. Minimum modulus theorem is contradicted. So this is the argument. So use MMT, suppose not, and contradict the minimum modulus theorem. So let's do that. Okay. So keep in mind we have to choose an R1 such that this is less than R1. MMT would say that if lambda minus f has no 0 in V, then lambda minus f will not have a local minimum in V. We are going to show that it has a minimum at Z1 inside this closed disk dZ1R for some R. Okay, so we have to finally choose an R1. So I'm going to choose any R. Take any R so that choose any one such disk. You choose an R so that V is open, so they will, and Z1 is in V, therefore there will be some disk inside V. So choose such a thing. Okay, and now we will choose our R1. This is some R. Okay, so choose one any one such disk. Our goal is achieved if the R1 that we choose is such that R1 is strictly less than the minimum of lambda minus f of z1 plus r e power I theta, right? So dz1r is inside V, and if you choose lambda such that the minimum of lambda minus f is bigger than R1, and we are going to show that we are assuming that lambda minus f at Z1 is less than R1. So minimum is attained at Z1. That's a contradiction. And the only way out is lambda minus f has to be, lambda minus f has to vanish, and that's what we wanted to show. Okay. So, so this is what you have to do. We have to, given this R, you have to choose an R1 such that R1 is less than this minimum. But remember, you had this whenever Z1 and Z2 are from V, you had this inequality. Modulus of f of Z1 minus Z2 is bigger than or equal to half f prime Z0 times mod Z1 minus Z2. So if you take Z1 plus r e power I theta and Z1, then the modulus is bigger than or equal to half modulus of f prime Z0 times modulus of the difference of these two numbers. Z1 plus r e power I theta and Z1, and that difference is modulus of r e power I theta, which is just r. So you have this inequality. So now the observation is you choose this number. So R is already taken and you have to choose an R1. You choose R1 so that 2R1 is this. So take the RHS about to be 2R1. This whole number RHS is 2R1, then you are done. Then R1 has to be less than this minimum. Why? Because otherwise there is a theta such that this modulus is less than or equal to R1. But if this modulus is less than or equal to R1 and lambda minus f is also f of z1 is also less than R1, then by triangle inequality this will be less than 2R1. But this is greater than or equal to 2R1. So if you choose R1 such that this is defined as 2R1, then by triangle inequality this follows. And that will contradict minimum modulus theorem, and only way out is lambda minus, if lambda minus f has no 0 on V, then that will contradict minimum modulus theorem. Therefore lambda minus f has a 0 on V, and therefore we are done. We have shown that it's an interior point, and W1 was arbitrary, and therefore f of V is open, and any open subset of V also the same argument goes through. So f of V is open and f is actually an open map on V. This much we have done. What is remaining now? Remaining thing is, so now you have got an invertible map injective, and therefore invertible map to the onto the range, and therefore the function is invertible, and you have to show that f inverse is holomorphic on the range. So for that, let us denote f inverse by h. H from f of v to v, let it be the inverse of f. And if w equal to f of z and w1 equal to f of z1 for z1 and z and z1 in v, we want to show that f is holomorphic, right? You want to show that f is differentiable at w1, and w1 is arbitrary. So you have to show that f is differentiable at w1. So what is the quotient that you have to consider? You have to consider f of w minus f of w1 by w minus w1. Not f, h. H is differentiable. So h of w minus h of w1 by w minus w1. But what is h of w? H of w is h of f of z, which is z. So this is nothing but z minus z1 by f of z minus f of z1. Agree? Z minus z1 by f of z minus f of z1. We have to take limit as w goes to w1. But as w goes to w1, what will happen? As w goes to w1, I claim that z goes to z1. Why is that? As w goes to w1, z goes to z1, because again you have this inequality, right? At the very starting you had this inequality from the continuity of that function g, such that f of z1 minus f of z2 modulus is bigger than or equal to some constant times modulus of z1 minus z2. So if f of z1 goes to f of z2, w goes to w1, then z has to go to z1 from that inequality. So this also you have, and therefore, yeah, because of this inequality, and therefore, and you also know that f prime is non-vanishing throughout V. This we have shown already. F prime is non-vanishing throughout V, which again follows from this inequality, and therefore h is differentiable. And not only that, what is h prime w1? It is limit w going to w1, but then it is z going to z1. So limit z going to z1 of this is nothing but 1 by the derivative of f at z1. So not only that it is differentiable, you have a formula for the derivative of h. H prime at w1 is 1 by f prime of z1, where w1 is f of z1. And this argument is valid because f prime is non-vanishing on V. So each of this quotient, the limit you can take, and you get this. Okay, so this is what I call towards OMT, which is IFT plus the assertion that on a neighborhood, f is an open map. F is locally open, we have shown. We want to show that f is open throughout your domain. What we have shown is f is locally open. Given a point, under this condition, if f prime is non-zero, then there is a neighborhood on which f is an open map. Without any condition, we have to show that f is an open map. That's what we are going to show. This was as preparation. So we will deduce OMT from IFT. Before coming to this, observe that, yeah, is there a question?
Yeah, in the previous part,
Yeah.
once we showed that F is an open map,
Yeah.
then don't we also get that H must be continuous, right?
H must be
continuous.
Yes, yeah, because H is the inverse of F. Yes.
Yeah, so that also then shows that if W tends to W1, then Z tends to Z1, right?
That also shows, right? Because what did we just say? We said that H is continuous, right?
Yeah.
H is continuous. Therefore, if W1 goes to W, of course, yes, yes. H of W1 will go to H of W will go to H of W1, and H of W is yes, yes, you're right. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So yeah, but it straight away follows from this inequality, which was our starting point in order to show all that. But having shown that, it follows straight away from that also. Yeah, so you have various arguments to show that. The rest of the proof is okay. You get H prime to be 1 by F prime. And yeah, so let's observe one, let's make one observation and then we will prove OMT from IFT. This observation is useful in order to formulate the next theorem. So if you want to recall this next theorem, the way, you know, if you phrase it like this, it's better. That's the reason I'm phrasing it like this. You consider this map Z going to Z power M, taking to the power M. The first observation is this is an open map. Why is that? So suppose you take a V which is open. So this is defined throughout C, and the claim is this is an open map. That's because two cases you have to consider. If your neighborhood V has 0 is not there in your neighborhood, you're taking your neighborhood away from 0, outside 0, then what is the derivative of this map? Mz m minus 1, mz power m minus 1, and that is not vanishing at all. And therefore, any point if you take from that neighborhood, there is a neighborhood on which f of v is open, right? If you take a v, there is a v naught such that f of v naught is open, and v is a union of such v naughts, and f of v is a union of open sets which is open. So if v does not contain 0, then f of v is open, where f is this set, f is this function pi m. Okay, now what if v contains 0? Then that argument doesn't work. But then, you know, because the function is explicit, what is the image of d0r? It is just d0 comma r power n. The radius just gets dilated. So there also it's open. So together, this is an open map. Okay, so if 0 is not in V, one argument from the last whatever we have done, and if 0 is there, if V contains 0, then you can take a open disk around 0 where it's open, and all other open disks you take without containing 0, there also it's open, union of open is open. So overall it's an open map. So the power map is open is obvious. Okay, and therefore it follows that if you take any map phi and compose with the power map, that is open if phi is open, because open composed with open is open. So if phi is open, then this is open, and therefore you know that this is open if phi prime is not vanishing throughout. If phi is defined on omega and with non-vanishing derivative throughout, if phi prime is never 0, then this is open, because if phi prime is never 0, then phi is open, whatever we have done. If phi prime is non-zero at a point, there is an open neighborhood. Therefore, if phi prime is non-vanishing throughout, at each point there is an open neighborhood on which the image is open, and therefore it follows that phi is an open map, because phi prime is non-vanishing throughout your domain. So composing an open map with an open map, you get an open map, and therefore this is open if phi prime is never vanishing. So now, so what have we observed in this slide? If you take the power map and if you compose with a phi such that phi prime is not vanishing, then this composition is an open map. And we are going to show a converse to this. What will be the converse? Converse will be if you have a holomorphic function, then it can be written like this: pi m compose phi with phi having this property, phi prime is not vanishing throughout, but that cannot be true. But what is true is locally the converse is true. So we are going to prove that every non-constant holomorphic function, open mapping theorem only for non-constant holomorphic functions, of course, otherwise the range is a singleton which is not open. So we are going to prove that every non-constant holomorphic function on a region is of this form pi m compose phi, not throughout but locally. Meaning there is a neighborhood on which your function can be written as pi m compose phi of this form, locally of this form, where phi has this property. Phi prime is never vanishing, phi is injective, all these nice properties of phi. Well, not quite, up to an additive constant. That is, you know, I mean, you have to do, because if you take, such a map and if you add a number, that also has this property. So up to that additive constant, we are going to show that every non-constant holomorphic function on a region is of this form locally, and open mapping theorem will be a corollary to this result that we are going to prove. So let's prove this result. If you have a non-constant holomorphic function on a region, it is locally of the form pi m compose phi, where phi has the nice properties. Phi is injective, phi prime is never vanishing, phi is open, etc. Right? Such a nice phi. So this is what we are going to show. So let us show that Z0 is an omega and W0 is f of Z0. Consider the function f minus W0. F minus W0 is holomorphic, right? F is holomorphic, W0 is a constant function W0, so difference is holomorphic. And f minus W0 has a 0 at Z0 from this condition. W0 is f of Z0, so f minus W0 evaluated at Z0 is 0. So this function has a 0 at the point Z0. You can ask what is its multiplicity? What is the order of the 0? So it will be some finite number. Say m is the multiplicity. Okay. And we are going to claim, so our claim was that locally it can be written as up to a constant, it can be written as pi m compose phi for some m. And it is this m that is going to play that role. So you take f minus W0, it has a 0 at Z0, let m be its multiplicity, and we claim that locally, meaning on a small neighborhood of that point Z0, that is an open neighborhood V of Z0, f is given by f of z equal to W0 plus not modulus, phi of z whole power m in this form. So this is fz minus W0 is pi m compose phi, that form. So locally you can express it like this. This is the claim. And moreover, phi is nice, meaning v and phi can be chosen so that phi of v is open. Not just that, I'm going to choose it carefully so that phi of v is not just open, it is actually an open disk. Phi is for some r, phi from v to, I will choose v, and phi says that phi is injective, phi prime is non-vanishing, and phi of v is open, not just open, it is d0r, and I have put double arrow here, meaning it is surjective. So phi is injective, surjective. So phi is bijective from v to d0r, and phi is an open map. Phi of v is open, and phi prime is non-vanishing throughout v. All these conditions together. Okay, this is what we are going to claim. So firstly, observe that without loss of generality, I can shrink v. I can take a small v around z0 such that in particular it's a disk or something. It's convex. And also there is no other 0 for the function f minus W0. Why is that? Why is this a without loss of generality statement? Yeah, you have given me some region and you have asked me to prove this result there, and I am saying that I'm going to take O to be, a small, nice, convex set around Z0 such that f minus W0 has no other 0 in that set. Why is this okay?
Because we want to do this locally.
Because you want to do this locally, absolutely, perfect. Because you want to do this locally, so you can assume, you can shrink your set and you can do this locally there, and then you are done because it's a local result. So this is without loss of generality, as we are proving a local result. Therefore, fz minus W0, remember this has a 0 at Z0 of what order? Order m. So that you can pull over z minus Z0 power m times gz, and m is the multiplicity. So what can you conclude about gz? G is of course holomorphic throughout omega. Not just that, G is non-vanishing throughout omega, because you are assuming f has no other 0 in omega, G has no other 0 in omega, and Z0 is also not a 0 in omega. Why? Because if Z0 is a 0, Z0 is also not a 0 of G. Because if Z0 is a 0 of G, then this M will increase. But M is the multiplicity. Therefore, Fz minus W0 can be written as Z minus Z0 power M times Gz, where G is holomorphic and G has the property that G has no 0 at all in omega. G is never vanishing on omega. because m is the multiplicity, z0 is also not a 0. And because f minus w0 has no other 0, g has no other 0 as well. Okay, so remember g is never vanishing throughout omega. What will you do typically in any math proof if you get something which is never vanishing? Any proof, when you have such a thing, what is the next thing? You will argue with 1 by g, because 1 by g makes sense. So that's what you're going to do. See, what do you want to do? What is the aim? Aim is to show that locally fz is of this form. That means f minus w0 is phi z power form. We have to find such a phi. So you have to find a phi such that phi power m is f minus w0. But f minus w0 is of this form. So what should be your phi? Your phi should be such that phi power m is this. So phi should be z minus z0 times something, and that something, its power should be g, right? You have to take a mth root of g. Mth root of this, of course, is obvious, z minus z0. And you have to take an mth root of g, which has all the nice properties. Phi has all these nice properties. So you have to choose an mth root of g with all the nice properties. That's the aim. You have to find a phi such that phi power m is g. Phi power m is this, which essentially means you have to find an mth root of g with these nice properties, and then you are done. So g has no 0, and we are going to argue with g prime by g. G prime by g is well defined because 1 by g is well defined. G is never vanishing, and g is holomorphic. Therefore 1 by g, since it's defined, it's holomorphic, and g prime is holomorphic. Therefore g prime by g is holomorphic throughout. Now remember the the Cauchy theorem for a convex set we have proved using fundamental theorem of one variable calculus, and we proved Cauchy theorem for a triangle, and after that you proved that if you have a holomorphic function, you have an antiderivative, you have a primitive. What was the proof? You give a candidate antiderivative by integrating along a line. On a convex set, you can get a line segment connecting the 2 points, and on that line segment, if you integrate, you got a candidate antiderivative, and you can show that the candidate is actually working by taking the quotient, right? Fz minus fz0 by z minus z0, and there you will use Cauchy's theorem for triangle. So finally, the point was that any holomorphic function has a primitive, an antiderivative. So let h be the antiderivative for this function, which is defined throughout omega. So this is Cauchy for convex domain. We have already done this. And that means what? H prime equal to g prime by g. But if g prime by g has h prime, then observe that g times e power minus h, its derivative is 0. That's exactly what you will get from g prime by g equal to h prime. G times e power minus h, its derivative will be g times e power minus h times minus h prime plus e power minus h times g prime, right? Plus e power minus h times g prime, and that follows, that is e power minus h times this difference, and e power minus h is never 0. Exponential is never 0. Therefore, no, you don't need exponential is never 0 here. From this g prime minus h prime g equal to 0, it follows that the derivative of this is 0, because this is nothing but e power minus h times this one. So this is 0, and therefore this function is a constant. G times e power minus h is a constant. So g is of the form c times e power h, but c is some exponential. Exponential is surjective. Exponential is surjective, meaning if c is non-zero, but c is non-zero because g is non-zero. C is a non-zero constant, therefore you can write it as exponential of something. So by adjusting h with an additive constant, you can assume that g equal to e power h itself. Adjust the c, adjust the h in order to absorb the c. So you can take g to be, we may take g equal to e power h itself, and now you have got, right? Once you have got, you wanted to take an mth root of g. But if g is of the form e power h, you can take a nice mth root, just take e power h by m. So phi z you take to be z minus z naught times e power h by m, so that phi z power m is z minus z naught power m times e power h, but e power h is g. That's what we wanted. So this argument shows that you have got an mth root, and this mth root is very nice. It has all the nice properties. It is holomorphic. Uh, it has all these nice properties, and let us check. So for z in omega, you have got what you wanted. Fz equal to w naught plus phi z power m, and note that phi of z naught is 0. By the construction, phi of z naught is 0, and phi prime at z naught is not 0, because phi prime at z naught will be z minus z naught times something plus something times 1, and that something is non-zero. So phi prime at z naught will be 0 plus something non-zero. Therefore, it is non-zero. Phi prime at z naught is non-zero, and because phi prime at z naught is non-zero, you have got all the nice properties for phi on a local. Locally, you have got all the nice properties from the IFT that we have already shown, right? Because phi prime at z naught is non-zero, there is a small neighborhood of z naught on which phi is open, phi is injective, and phi is invertible from the range, and the inverse is holomorphic. All these nice properties we have shown just from the derivative non-vanishing at this point. So therefore, there is a neighborhood V of Z naught such that phi is injective on V, phi prime is non-vanishing throughout V, and phi of V is open. From the earlier theorem, what I called IFT or towards OMT. Okay, so Y is answered. And also phi of V contains 0 because phi of Z naught is 0. Phi of V contains 0. So now, you know what, the only thing remaining is I have asserted that I can choose my phi and V such that phi of V is not just open, phi of V can be taken to be D0R. Right? My assertion was a bit more. Phi of V is D0R, not just any open set. So how do I get that? That's easy now. Now that we have proved this much, the last part is take D0R contained in phi of V. That you can do, no? Because phi of V is open. So, and 0 belongs to phi of V. So there is a small neighborhood of 0 which is contained in V. So there is an R such that D0R is contained in phi of V, and replace this V by phi inverse of D of 0R. Phi inverse of D of 0R will be open because phi is continuous, and this will be a subset of V. So you replace the V that you have constructed with the subset of V, so that all the properties are true. So phi of V will be exactly this, and because phi prime of Z naught is 0, all these phi Z naught is there in this set because phi of Z naught is 0, and because phi prime Z naught is non-zero, phi has all the properties on that set as well. So we may assume that V is such that phi of V is D0. So this is what we claimed. So locally, at least, any holomorphic function up to a constant is of the form pi m compose phi for a nice function phi with all these nice properties for some m. What is m? M is the multiplicity of the 0 at z naught of f minus w naught. If you take a point w naught, consider the function f minus w naught, that is a 0, and the multiplicity, if it is m, then locally up to a constant, you can write any holomorphic function locally up to a constant is of the form pi m compose phi with very nice properties for phi. That's what we have shown. Now OMT follows easily because now omega is any region, and I'm going to show that phi is an open map, f is an open map if f is holomorphic on omega. So we have to show that f of omega is the region, right? If you take a sub-open set, that's a region, and the same proof will show that f of that is open. So you have to show that f of omega is open. Connectedness is if anyway continuous of connected is connecting. So you have to show that f of omega is open. So take w naught in f of omega, and you have to show that a small neighborhood of w naught is contained in f of omega. So write w naught as f of z naught. So now you know that there is a neighborhood V of Z naught. Locally, f minus w naught is of the form pi m compose phi. So there is a V such that V containing Z naught, open neighborhood, such that f minus w naught is of the form pi m compose phi in V, where phi is a map from V to surjecting to onto D0R, and there's a nice map. All those nice properties are there: injective, open, inverse is holomorphic. We don't need all of that. Some of that only we need. Okay, so you have this this much we have already done. Therefore, you observe that what is f of v now? F minus w naught of v is pi m of phi of v, but phi of v is d0r, and pi m of d0r is d0r power m, and then you are translating by w naught, so d0r power m plus w naught will be dw naught r power m. So you have got a neighborhood of w naught. You've got a neighborhood of w naught completely contained inside f of omega, showing that f of omega is open. W naught is an interior point, therefore open mapping theorem is proved. Point is done. Okay, let's you know what we have proved. Let's just extract one more observation. That's a nice observation. The proof also shows that f is an m to 1 mapping. Exactly m to 1 mapping. What is m to 1? It's not 1 1. It is m to 1. Meaning, given a point, it has exactly m pre-images. Given a point in the range, it has exactly m pre-images. Where is it m to 1? V minus z naught to the deleted neighborhood of w naught with radius r power m. Okay, why does that follow? At z naught anyway, you know, it's a 0 of multiplicity m, so you have nothing more to say. But at all other points where there's no 0, it is actually there are m things which go to a point, and that follows because if phi z is in d0r, then you can take a primitive, you can take any mth root of unity, and zeta times phi z is also in d0r. Modulus of this, modulus of zeta is 1. What is zeta? It's an mth root of unity. How many mth root of unity? How many mth roots of unity are there? Exactly m. So you are getting all these zeta phi z in d0r. Zeta is any mth root of unity. And now if you take phi of z prime equal to zeta phi z. So zeta phi z is in d0r. You take the inverse image of that under phi. So you will get some z prime. So modulus of phi of z prime power m is phi of z power m, and therefore f of z prime equal to f of z. So given a point, you have constructed m many pre-images. So it's an m to 1 mapping. So that follows from the proof that we have done, that it's an m to 1 mapping. And as a corollary, you can show that if f is injective, then f prime is never vanishing. If f is injective, then the derivative is never vanishing. Again, you know, very much unlike your real analysis. Real analysis, you know, you can have derivative can vanish and f can still be injective. You can easily cook up even polynomial examples. So here, if you have a holomorphic function and then if it is injective, then f prime is never vanishing on omega. Why is that? Because, and f inverse is of course holomorphic, that we have already seen. If f prime is vanishing, what will happen? If f prime is vanishing, you consider the function f minus f of z naught. So f minus f z naught obviously is 0 at z naught, and its derivative is also vanishing at z naught. Therefore, it has a 0 of multiplicity at least 2. And if it has a 0 of multiplicity at least 2, f is at least 2 to 1 from this observation. But f is given to be 1 1, and therefore it cannot be 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 or something. And therefore, this has to be wrong. So f prime never vanishes. So if you have an injective holomorphic function, f prime never vanishes, and moreover f inverse is holomorphic, we have already seen. Okay, contradicting injectivity. Last observation, now that the converse is not true. What would be the converse? Converse is that if f prime is never vanishing, then f is injective. That is not true. You have the famous example, right? E power z. E power z is never vanishing, but that doesn't make it injective. It's not injective. E power 2 pi I is same as e power 0. So what is true is it is locally injective. That's all that you can see. So in this example, it is only locally injective. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. So we will stop recording and let us try. So we have some time. It is 10:40. We have 20 minutes. And if you don't have any other class, and if there is so much discussion, we can take maybe 5 more minutes or something. So what we are going to do now is, I will stop this recording. We will try moving to G Suite. All of us will move to G Suite, and we will also try recording there. And just to test out all the features, because we might need to use it again. Okay, so let's go to MS Teams, and maybe let us not quit this. Let us be here also. Okay. So what I will try is on another tab, I will open my G Suite, and all of you also do that, and let's see. Anyway, this recording I am stopping now.